Let's talk about where a new life truly begins. Most people imagine it starts with a burst of energy, a grand decision, or a sudden change in circumstances. But the truth is, every genuine new beginning starts with an ending. Something must be closed before something else can open. And until we learn to acknowledge the power of ending before beginning, we remain trapped in cycles that repeat themselves year after year. Think about it. We cannot step into a new chapter while still dragging the baggage of the old one. Yet so many try. They want transformation without transition, progress without release. They want to carry yesterday's habits, yesterday's relationships, yesterday's excuses, into a tomorrow that promises to be brighter. But life doesn't work that way. If your hands are full of the past, how can they grasp the future? This is why the first act of starting a new life is subtraction, not addition. It's not about what you add in, it's about what you let go of. It's about identifying what no longer serves you. Whether that's a belief that limits you, a habit that weakens you, or a circle of influence that keeps you stuck. To continue holding on is to make an unconscious choice, the choice to stay the same. Psychologically, endings are difficult because they feel like death. The brain resists change because it clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. But philosophy teaches us something deeper. Death is not the end of life. It is the condition for renewal. Just as a tree sheds its leaves in autumn, not as a loss but as preparation for spring, we too must shed the old to allow space for growth. And here's the paradox. Most people fear endings, yet the very thing they fear is the doorway to freedom. Ending a destructive routine is the first taste of liberty. Ending toxic associations is the first step toward clarity. Ending self-deception, the stories we tell ourselves about why we can't change, is the beginning of truth. And truth, once embraced, is the soil where a new life can take root. Ask yourself, what must I end before I begin? What habits no longer deserve my time? What thoughts no longer align with the person I wish to become? What situations am I tolerating that quietly drain my future? These are not easy questions, but they are essential ones. Because if you can answer them honestly, you place yourself in the rare position of having the courage to start over clean. Now, some will say, but letting go is painful. And yes, it can be, but so is staying stuck. Pain is unavoidable. What you must decide is whether you choose the pain of growth or the pain of regret. One leads to renewal, the other to repetition. And the older you get, the heavier repetition feels. The good news is this: endings are within your control. You may not control when life throws you a storm, but you can decide when to walk away from the anchors that hold you in place. You can decide today that yesterday is over. That's the essence of freedom, to consciously end what no longer deserves a place in your life. And once you do, something remarkable happens. You create space. Space for new habits, new beliefs, new people, new opportunities. It is in that empty space where possibility lives. The seed of your future cannot grow in crowded soil. Only when you clear the ground can life give you something fresh. So if you're serious about starting a new life, don't begin by asking, what should I do? Start by asking, what should I stop? Because the future belongs not only to the person who builds, but to the person who is willing to tear down what no longer belongs. The first act of transformation is courage. The courage to end. And the moment you end with conviction, you open the door to everything waiting for you on the other side. Remember this: nothing new can begin until something old has ended. Once you've made peace with endings, once you've cleared space for something new, the next step is to redefine who you are. Because starting a new life isn't just about doing things differently. It's about being someone different. And that distinction is vital. You don't get a new life by carrying the same old identity into a different setting. You get a new life when you decide, deep down, to author a new definition of yourself. The problem is, most people let circumstance write their identity for them. They say, I'm this way because that's how I was raised. Or, I am what my experiences have made me. They wear their past like a permanent label. And as long as you see yourself through the lens of circumstance, you will remain confined by it. But identity is not fate, it's a choice. You can choose to be more than what happened to you. You can choose to step into a version of yourself that isn't dictated by the past, but designed for the future. Philosophically, this is one of the most liberating truths you can grasp. You are not obligated to remain the person you've been. The self is not fixed. It's fluid. And once you recognize that, you gain the power to shape it intentionally. That means if you've always been undisciplined, you can choose to be disciplined. If you've always been reactive, you can choose to be proactive. If you've always seen yourself as a victim, you can choose to become the author. Identity is not something you wait to discover. It's something you declare. Now, there's a psychological reason this matters so much. Human behavior is tied to identity. We act in ways that confirm who we believe we are. If you tell yourself, I'm not the type of person who exercises, you won't. If you say, I'm just bad with money, you'll prove yourself right every time. But the moment you change the story, I'm a disciplined person. I'm someone who respects money. I'm committed to growth. Your behavior begins to align with that story. You stop working against yourself and start working with yourself. That's why redefining identity is the true beginning of transformation. It's not about willpower. It's about self-definition. Willpower is temporary, but identity is enduring. If you see yourself as someone new, you no longer have to force new behavior. The behavior flows naturally from who you now believe yourself to be. But here's the challenge: redefining identity requires honesty. You can't build a new definition on lies. You have to be willing to say, this is who I've been, but it is not who I must remain. That kind of honesty is uncomfortable, but it's also the doorway to power. Once you admit the truth about your old self, you gain the freedom to choose a new one. So let me ask you, who are you deciding to become? Not, who do you hope to become? Not, who would you like to be if things worked out? But who are you consciously choosing to be? Because that choice is the foundation of your new life. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need permission from anyone to make it. You don't need validation. You simply decide. And yes, it will feel strange at first. Every new identity feels unnatural in the beginning because your old patterns resist it. But stick with it, and soon the unfamiliar becomes familiar, the uncomfortable becomes comfortable, and the new you becomes the only you. That's how identity works. It reshapes reality with consistency. So don't ask life for a new beginning without offering it a new identity. Endings prepare the ground, but identity plants the seed. Once you declare who you are, you'll know what to do, and soon you'll live it. Once you've put an end to what no longer belongs, and once you've chosen a new identity to step into, the next step is to establish a new philosophy of living. Because without a new philosophy, you'll eventually fall back into the same old patterns. A philosophy is simply the set of guiding principles you live by. It's how you interpret the world, how you filter decisions, how you make sense of time, effort, money, relationships, and purpose. And here's the truth: Your philosophy is always shaping your destiny, whether you're aware of it or not. Most people don't think they have a philosophy, but everyone does. If you believe that life is mostly luck, that's a philosophy. If you think time is something to be wasted rather than invested, that's a philosophy. If you see effort as something to avoid instead of embrace, that too is a philosophy. And the outcome of your life is simply the harvest of the philosophy you've been living by. Weak philosophies produce weak results. Strong philosophies produce strong results. The reason this step matters so much is because behavior follows belief. You can declare a new identity, but if your philosophy is flawed, your actions will always sabotage you. If you believe deep down that discipline is punishment, you won't stay disciplined. If you believe that wealth is only for the lucky or corrupt, you'll never build it. If you believe relationships are just about convenience, you'll never cultivate depth. You see, identity shapes the self, but philosophy shapes the system that self lives within. And without a strong system, even the strongest intentions collapse. Philosophically, the most powerful shift you can make is to start treating life as a long-term investment. To understand that every choice compounds, every hour compounds, every decision you make, every book you read, every dollar you save or spend compounds into a future that either serves you or limits you. The person who understands this doesn't live casually. They live consciously. They don't ask, "Does this feel good now?" They ask, "Will this matter later?" That's the difference between drifting through life and designing it. Now let's make this practical. A new philosophy of living begins by asking hard but simple questions. What do I believe about time? Do I treat it as infinite, or do I honor it as scarce? What do I believe about work? Do I see it as a burden to escape, or a tool for growth? What do I believe about relationships? Do I choose people who stretch me, or do I surround myself with those who let me stay small? Your philosophy is revealed in the answers. And if you don't like the answers, you must be willing to change them. This is where many stumble. They try to build a new life on old philosophies. They want success, while keeping the belief that effort is optional. They want fulfillment, while keeping the belief that pleasure is the highest goal. They want growth, while keeping the belief that learning ends after school. It doesn't work. A new life requires a new philosophy because philosophy is the foundation. And if the foundation is shaky, no matter how beautiful the structure, it won't stand. The beauty is, philosophy is a choice. You can adopt one that serves you. You can decide, from now on, I see time as my greatest asset. Or, from now on, I believe discipline is the path to freedom. Or, from now on, I treat relationships as investments, not distractions. When you shift your philosophy, your actions align. And when your actions align, your results transform. So if you truly want to start a new life, don't just ask, "Who do I want to be?" Ask, "What philosophy will support that person?" Because a new identity without a new philosophy is like planting a seed in shallow soil. It may sprout, but it won't last. Once you've laid the foundation of a new philosophy, the next step is to bring it alive through daily renewal. Because here's the truth, change does not happen in a single leap. It happens in small steps that are repeated every day. A new life is not built in a moment of inspiration. It is built in the structure of habits. You can have the best identity, the strongest philosophy, but without daily reinforcement, life will quietly pull you back to the familiar. Think of it this way. The world is constantly eroding your progress. Stress, distractions, temptations, the noise of culture. All of it works to pull you away from your higher self. If you don't have a system of renewal, you drift. That's why daily practices matter so much. They aren't rituals for perfection, they are anchors for direction. They remind you each day of who you've decided to become and what philosophy you've chosen to live by. Psychologically, this is critical. The brain thrives on repetition. What you do consistently rewires your identity at a deeper level than what you do occasionally. Reading 1 page a day matters more than finishing 1 book a year. Moving your body for 20 minutes a day matters more than running a marathon once in your life. Speaking gratitude daily matters more than giving thanks once on a holiday. Renewal doesn't require intensity. It requires consistency. And consistency is what transforms identity into lifestyle. Now, here's the mistake many make: they wait for motivation. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. Renewal, on the other hand, is a discipline. You don't wait to feel inspired to brush your teeth. You simply do it. The same is true of your new life. You don't wait to feel ready to invest in yourself. You schedule it. You don't wait for the perfect mood to practice self-discipline. You build it into your routine. Renewal is less about feeling and more about commitment. And the beauty of daily renewal is that it compounds. Every small act, repeated, builds strength over time. 1 day of renewal feels small. A week feels encouraging. A year feels transformative. And 5 years, you won't even recognize yourself. Renewal is the quiet architect of destiny. Philosophically, daily renewal also carries a deeper meaning. It acknowledges that life is always moving, always shifting. You cannot hold on to yesterday's victories, and you cannot be defined by yesterday's failures. Renewal is the practice of returning each day to the present moment and choosing again. Choosing who you are, what you believe, and how you act. Without that daily return, the old self creeps back in. But with it, the new self gains permanence. So, what does renewal look like? It can be as simple as starting the morning with reflection instead of distraction. It can be reading a page of wisdom, writing down your goals, moving your body, or practicing gratitude. The form doesn't matter as much as the consistency. What matters is that every day, you do something to remind yourself of who you are becoming. If you think of life as a garden, endings are the clearing of weeds. Identity is choosing what to plant. Philosophy is the soil, and renewal is the watering. Without water, even the healthiest seed in the richest soil dries up. Renewal is what gives life energy. So remember this: your life doesn't change because you decided once. It changes because you decide daily. A new life isn't a single choice. It's a repeated choice. Renewal is what keeps that choice alive. Once you've committed to daily renewal, the next element in building a new life is just as important: your environment. Because here's the truth. No matter how strong your willpower is, no matter how disciplined your routine, environment will always exert a stronger pull. You can't expect to plant the seeds of your new identity in the same soil that sustained your old one. If you want a different future, you must build an environment that supports it. Think about how much of human behavior is influenced by surroundings. If you're around people who complain all day, you'll find yourself complaining. If you're in a space filled with clutter, your mind becomes cluttered. If your schedule is dominated by distractions, you'll live distracted. We like to imagine that we are in full control, but psychology shows otherwise. We adapt to whatever environment we inhabit. If the current of your environment is flowing against your new identity, you will spend your life swimming upstream. But if the current flows in your favor, progress feels almost effortless. Philosophically, this is a humbling lesson. It reminds us that transformation isn't just about will. It's also about design. You must design the conditions of your life so they naturally support the person you're becoming. That might mean changing who you spend time with. It might mean reorganizing your home so it feels like a place of order rather than chaos. It might mean cutting off sources of distraction and replacing them with sources of learning and growth. A new life cannot grow in the old environment. It needs new soil, new light, new air. The challenge is that many people underestimate the power of environment. They think, I can handle it. But environment doesn't confront you directly. It shapes you subtly, slowly, until one day you realize you've drifted back to old patterns. That's why creating a supportive environment isn't optional, it's essential. Now, this doesn't mean you need to abandon everything and everyone in your past, but it does mean you must evaluate honestly who and what belongs in the life you're building, which relationships pull you forward, and which ones keep you tied to old habits, which spaces energize you, and which ones drain you, which influences expand your vision, and which ones limit it. This kind of evaluation may feel uncomfortable, but it is the price of transformation. Here's the good news. You can engineer your environment to work for you. Want to read more? Put books within reach and remove distractions from your phone. Want to eat better? Fill your kitchen with nourishing food and remove the temptations. Want to grow financially? Spend time with people who talk about opportunities, not complaints. The smallest adjustments in your environment create the largest shifts in your behavior because they eliminate friction from the path of growth. And let's be honest, sometimes building a new environment means stepping into new circles. If the people around you can't see the person you're becoming, you may need to find people who can. Rohn famously said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." That's not just motivational talk. That's a profound truth about environment. If your 5 closest influences are small thinkers, your world shrinks. If they're big thinkers, your world expands. So ask yourself, is your environment designed for the future you, or is it keeping you anchored to the past? Because the strongest identity and the best philosophy can only survive in an environment that nourishes them. If you want lasting change, you can't just change yourself. You must also change the world you live in daily. Now, once you've let go of the past, defined a new identity, embraced a new philosophy, built the habit of daily renewal, and surrounded yourself with the right environment, there is still one more step. And it may be the most decisive of all. You must commit to becoming a creator, not a drifter. Because in the end, a new life is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you build. The danger for most people is drifting. Drifting looks harmless at first. You go along with circumstances. You wait for opportunities to fall into your lap. You accept whatever life gives. But drifting has a cost. It trades your authorship for passivity. And the longer you drift, the less control you feel. Before long, life isn't something you're shaping, it's something you're enduring. Psychologically, drifting feels comfortable because it doesn't require responsibility. If life doesn't go well, you can always blame the economy, your upbringing, or someone else's choices. But that very comfort is what keeps people trapped. The truth is, no new life can emerge from drifting. Creation requires direction, intentionality, and the willingness to say, I am responsible for what happens next. That shift in ownership is the dividing line between an old life and a new one. Philosophically, this is about moving from victimhood to authorship. A victim waits, an author writes. A victim explains why things are the way they are. An author asks how they could be different. A victim reacts to life. An author creates life. And here's the beauty. You don't have to wait for permission to create. The act of creation begins the moment you decide to stop drifting. Now, what does it mean to be a creator in practical terms? It means you don't wait for perfect conditions. You start where you are. You don't wait for inspiration. You build momentum through action. You don't wait for someone to open a door. You build your own. Creation is the discipline of making something where nothing existed before: a new routine, a new relationship, a new opportunity, a new future. And here's the secret. When you begin to create, life responds differently to you. Doors that were invisible begin to appear. People who would have passed you by now take notice. Circumstances seem to shift in your favor. It's not magic, it's alignment. When you create, you align your energy, your identity, and your philosophy with movement. And movement attracts possibility. Of course, creation requires courage. Because when you create, you expose yourself to failure. You risk criticism. You risk stepping into the unknown. But what's the alternative? To avoid risk is to guarantee regret. To drift is to ensure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll look back and realize you never truly lived. And regret is a heavier burden than failure will ever be. So, the choice is simple. Will you drift, or will you create? Will you let life happen, or will you build the life you've envisioned? Everything we've spoken about, endings, identity, philosophy, renewal, environment, all of it leads to this one choice. Because without creation, everything else remains potential. With creation, potential becomes reality. So, don't wait. Don't hope. Don't drift. Choose to be the author of your own story. Choose to design, to build, to create. Because in the end, your new life will not be handed to you. It will be written by you.